Support for Gig with Mike Redman comes from Music Connection, for 45 years connecting artists and musicians with each other and the industry. And you can find them on the web at musicconnection.com. Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to Gig, the ultimate podcast for learning about jobs in the music and film industry. I'm your host, Mike Redman. You most likely will not know my next guest, Dan Carlin, but you should. Dan's dad and his family and eventually the entire neighborhood were the start of Segue Music, the motion picture and television industry's largest provider of on-set, post-production music services, including well over 1,000 film and TV productions. Dan is also a renowned educator, first at Berklee College as the chair of their film scoring department, and later as the director of screen scoring at USC, as well as chairman of the Grammys. Dan's now comfortable in his mountain paradise where we had a wonderful conversation via Zoom. Hey, how are you?
How are you, pal?
You are the recent director of film scoring for USC, Thornton School of Music.
Right.
Probably the most prestigious film music program in the world, I think. Would you talk a little bit about, your feelings about the time you spent there and maybe a couple of highlights that stood out to you that you'll always remember as being amazing?
Okay, well, if I can just back up to Berklee, because Berklee was my first. When I set up the business, I ran the Henry Mancini Institute for a couple of years. And that was about music education, but it wasn't working at a school. We worked with schools, but then I got this call to go to Berklee College of Music, which is, at that time, 4,300 students. USC is 43,000 students.
Oh my gosh,
but at Berklee, it's all music all the time. I mean, everybody there loves music. So it's and it's a college, not a university. And so it's kind of a different environment. And I loved working there. And I was there for 5 years, and we established a master's program that we set up in Valencia, Spain, and we created a new recording studio and did all the kinds of stuff that you would want a good program to do. And while we were there, that was named the #1 program in the world. So anyway, but it's an undergraduate program there, and then the graduate programs in Valencia. So 5 years into this thing, I get a call from the dean at USC and the Thornton Music School, and he says, our guy that's been here 10 years is leaving, and we're looking for somebody new, and your name keeps popping up. Would you come out and do an interview? And so I came back and did an interview, and it was there were like 3 of the people on the committee were people I've worked with for 30 years. Bruce Brown.
Interesting interview, yeah.
Yeah, Dick McGilvery and Kenny Hall, and so who was Jerry Goldsmith's music editor. So the dean didn't stand a chance. He told me later, he said, there's just no way that I couldn't hire you. These guys told me they would leave. So, and I wasn't anxious to leave Berklee, except we were missing our family and our friends out here, our community. And so we did come out here, and it as I say, it's a different situation. The university is not focused there on music at all. I mean, they know they have a music school, and it's a good music school with a good reputation. But you're just one of many things on that, and you're certainly not as important as the football team.
Is anything more important?
So,
no, sorry.
So that
sorry, I didn't mean that. Okay, I did. I kind of did. Yeah, but whatever.
I know. Yeah, I know. So one of the things that I said to the dean was that NYU has a master's degree program, and we should this thing that we're doing is called a graduate certificate program. And when you graduated, they didn't even count you. You couldn't claim to be an alumnus or an alumna for women, alumnus for men, right? So I can get my Latin straight. Sorry, Father. Anyway, I wanted to make it a master's degree program. He said, well, we've tried in the past, but let's try a different approach. And we did, and it was successful. And ultimately it was named the best program. there was some shuffling, but the major thing was really getting that master's program off the ground.
Could you talk about a student that came through one of your programs that, man, as soon as you knew them and heard them or watched them, that you knew they were going to be successful because there was nothing that was going to stop them?
Yeah, that is true. There are those students. One of them is from Italy, Marco Antonini. We get about 200 applicants every year. Mm-hmm. And we have to narrow it down. We can only take 20.
Wow, I had no idea it was that few.
Well, the reason is that if we have 20, they can have 14 minutes on the stand at each of our 10 or 11 scoring sessions every year. And if we have more than that, then you cut. Pretty soon it's not effective at all. So we kind of drew the line there. So we have to go through all these 200 people, and we have a committee that does that, faculty members, and but there's some people that just jump out at you right away and go, "Holy crap! We definitely want this student here. Not only because this person's probably going to be successful, but will be great inspiration and influence on the other students. Will be very helpful." And so one of those was this guy Marco Antonini. And Bruce Broughton, who was on our committee at that time, he was teaching with us. He spotted him right away also and informed him about a contest in Spain where they have a winery that they've reopened after a couple of generations, apparently. And they made an 8-minute documentary on this, and then had a competition, a worldwide competition, inviting anybody to write for this. And Bruce heard about it, and he went to Marco and he said, "You should apply for this." The reason Bruce heard about it, he was on the judging committee, but he had to withdraw because Marco applied. And he won like 50,000 euros was the prize. It paid for his year at USC. It was just fantastic. And he's doing very well now.
What's your idea about, just where the film industry's headed these days? Are there more opportunities for people that were at your school? Are there less? Are they more competitive? What do you think?
Well, there's more product now, not necessarily more movies, although I don't know what those numbers are, but things got screwy because of the pandemic, so it threw off the arc.
Sure.
We're not really sure, but there's so much product being made that there are jobs for music editors and music supervisors. So editors and the field that I'm somewhat familiar with. But your question, if you don't mind, I'd like to just speak a little bit about, or discuss with you anyway, and get your response too, about the changes that are going on, not just with technology, but in the style of music. Because my heyday was melodic scoring. Took place during melodic scoring. I was not ever trained to do that, nor did I try. I did arranging and stuff and conducting, but I never tried to be a composer. I never trained for that or attempted to do it. So, but the people that I admired so much that were successful at it, they'd create a theme and then develop that theme. One of my all-time favorite scores was by Ennio Morricone for The Mission. There's 3 main themes in that movie, and by the time you get to the end of the movie, they're all playing at the same time. Now, that doesn't occur to you in Reel 12. That's a vision you have to have from the very beginning of the movie. And so, for me, that's just great art. And he's not the only one to do that stuff, but that's the most blatant example I can think of in a movie that should have won an Academy Award but didn't. But anyway, but what's happened since then, starting in the 90s, I would say, was this thing that we're leaning more toward ambience and non-melodic approaches and sound design incorporated into music and whatnot. So, and I don't want to put that down. And there are people that are really good at it. But it's not the way I was taught to. It's like if you're an art historian or something, or it's not the way I was taught to look at film music. And so it's difficult for me. It's challenging for me to get behind this stuff. When I think, oh man, wouldn't it be great if she had a theme in this music? So that then when somebody else is singing about her and you just hit those little notes, you go, oh, he's thinking about her, And but that's not the approach now. And directors don't want it. And so composers have learned that. And every director wants to be as innovative as possible on a movie. And so doesn't want it to sound like the last movie. And so you're getting more and more experimenting with this stuff. What I'm curious to know, and what I would ask folks in the know is, so are we still juggling around with that stuff and we're going to come to some sort of a compromise, or are we going to leave that melodic stuff behind?
Would you share with us your version of the story you told me many years ago about your father and how he decided to leave the business and how it started?
Sure. Thanks for that. And I'm always happy to honor my father. He was one of the music editors that participated in the old system, which was until about the early 70s. Every job that you see on the screen credits was done by somebody who virtually everyone is hired by the studios. So each studio had a music department, they had an editorial department, they had a writing department, they had directing. You were affiliated with one studio, and that's how it was with music editors. And so my dad, worked on several series like that, Lassie and Mission Impossible. And shows that were, the Untouchables, that were big series at that time. And one of the composers that he got to work with was Jerry Fielding, who later received an Oscar nomination for The Outlaw Josie Wales, one of Eastwood's early directing films. Yeah. So anyway, but Jerry and my dad became very close friends, and then Jerry got a job for an independent studio, or for an independent production company. And because they couldn't pay him through the union, because they were not a union signatory, my dad had to form his own company, which he laughingly referred to as Lada. His wife at that time was Lavani, and he was Dan, so they just called it Lada, or La-di-da, Lada Productions. But it was like when an attorney or a doctor, incorporates, so that then they pay themselves from their own company and has tax advantages. But in his case, it was mainly just to be able to pay his health and welfare, keep his pension and health and welfare going. And so he had to form this company. He had no intention of doing anything besides being an independent worker. Well, during the 60s and 70s, the late 60s, early 70s, you were around a little bit.
Yeah, I was definitely around.
Yeah, so the culture was exploding, as you remember. We were in a cultural revolution, and filmmakers wanted to make movies about that stuff. And the studios were walking on eggshells, because in the 50s they dealt with McCarthyism and the Red Scare and all that sort of stuff, and the blacklists and whatnot. And Jerry Fielding, in fact, was one of the people that got blacklisted. He had to leave the business for a while because he had been affiliated with communist affiliated organization. wasn't a communist, but in those days, if you were anti-fascist, you could be labeled. So anyway, sorry, I'm getting off track. But okay, so politics were a big deal. Well, the studios didn't want to make those kind of movies, so independent-minded producers and directors formed their own production companies, but to make these kind of movies, and like Easy Rider, for instance, those kind of films that were trend setting, and but because they didn't have access to the studio, then they didn't have access to the studio infrastructure. No art department, no music department, no editorial department, none of that. So one of the people that were one of the production companies came to my dad and said, "Listen, we need to set up we don't know how to do a budget for a composer. We don't know where to get a studio. So anyway, can you take care of that stuff for us?" Because he had a good reputation as a music editor, was respected, and had been in the business for a while. So so that's what we did. Now, my dad was not interested in doing that part. So I had a bit of economic training, political economy and whatnot from my graduate days. So he said, why don't you handle this? So I said, okay, I will. And the first major project I got, there was a TV project. And then somehow, and I don't know how, but I stumbled into the Black Stallion, Francis Coppola's American Zoetrope Company, which again had no access to that stuff. So I became the music company. I became the music supervisor, but we became the music company for Francis production company. And that just led, from one to, in our business, you get good credits. I mean, that film got an Academy Award and got a Golden Globe nomination for score. And so when you get those kind of credits, then people say, "Oh, you must know what you're doing." And so,
and you did,
yes, we did. and so my dad's role then became to kind of not only to do shows as a music editor, but to train the rest of the people coming in. And as you said in the bios, my brother Tom and my sister Kathy and Patty, and our cousins Susie and JJ and Danny and the neighbor's son, Mike Tronick was actually, who's a very successful film editor now, and one of the governors at the Motion Picture Academy. Mike was actually the one person who preceded me in the company. He'd gone to my dad and said, "Will you train me?" And so my dad trained Mike, and Mike had another friend, and he brought him in, Alan Rosen, who was a photographer. But, and then we got somebody else was a friend of Bob Badamy, who was a trumpet player down in San Diego, and we hired Bob, and now he's like the super music editor. My dad's best friend had a son, Jeff Carson, who we brought in. Jeff now, does all of Alan Silvestri's and John Debney's movies as a music editor. So my dad had this great legacy and was admired by many people. And so I got to bask in the glow of that. And so I had an instant credibility, that's the advantage, one of the advantages of nepotism, obviously. And so as long as I didn't screw up too badly, and I made some mistakes, but they were survivable in terms of doing things correctly and getting the budget right and talking to the right people and stuff, But that's how it just grew and grew, because my dad was so good at what he did, and he trained the rest of us to be good. The demand kept coming in, and so we got up to 30. We had up to 30 people at one point. It was really quite amazing, and really, hard work, but really joyful time. You get together on a good team, and it's really a great pleasure. And that's the great thing about this business is collaboration. It's not really, unless you're a writer like yourself, but you're also a composer, so about work. What it's like to sit there at the blank page, and of course you do that as a composer too. But then you start bringing in collaborators. When you're writing, you don't, it's the editor maybe, and that's about it. So in our business, collaboration is key. and you have to be a really good team player. And if you are, then everybody, here's an advantage. For instance, if you're working on a tough project as, say, a music editor, and you can see, the dubbing. Now we're dubbing tomorrow morning at 9:00, and they just changed reel 13, or they've changed reel 1, worse, because they're going to dub in order. Then it's like, oh my God, I'm going to be up all night trying to fix this stuff. Well, at our company, it was like, hey, Curtis Rausch is on this project, and he's in a jam. Who can stay tonight and help? And so 4 or 5 of us would stay, and then we'd all be out of there at 10:00 instead of him being there all night long. And so Curtis, of course, remembers that. And the next time somebody's in trouble, he's like, hey, I'm here to help. What do you need? Or you get in a jam on a stage where you need a music editor on the stage to consult with the director, but they're making changes in the booth. So you can't be in 2 places at once. So one of our music editors, my sister, would run over and go in the booth and make film changes while the regular music editor is on the stage. So that's when I really gained a great love for working on teams. It was terrific stuff. And so that's the rationale for the creation of the company. And we were in the right place at the right time with the right guy, not me, my dad.
That's very cool. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's one of the things that makes you so relevant in the industry, that you were there. It just reminds me, I can't remember who I was talking to, but they kind of just put it in 2 camps. They said, you have thematic scores and you have the basic underscore, the music that's there that you never noticed, it never exists. It only is there to support the visual at that moment. And very, very few themes. And I tend to see both fairly regularly, although when I was talking to Mark Scruton yesterday, he was talking about the series work that's out now, the turnaround times for everything except the $200 million projects. There's not much time. And as well as I do, you're scoring a film, you've got some themes going back and forth and stuff, but you don't go to work till that thing's almost, locked. And so if they're doing just say a 1-hour episode of TV, that time you used to have like 10, 12 days to write that episode, to score that episode. Now you've got 2. And so I wonder, I don't know, one part of me says, well, I do know this for a fact that most of these guys that are doing this kind of work, they just have their library of, cues that go for that thing, and they're just kind of stretching them and moving them and changing them a little bit just to knock it out. So that would seem like it doesn't leave you time to develop themes very well.
Well, that's a good point. That's a very good point. And also the instantaneous thing with technology, with you flip a switch and hit this and you can create stuff. Director goes, oh yeah, I like that. I like it, So, but here's the good side of that. And it goes back to your original question. And thanks for indulging me on this aspect of the artist part. Now, if we get to the craft part, which is that and I gave the example with Duncan Thumb. It takes a team now. It used to be just you, but now it very frequently takes a team because of this 2-day turnaround. So more positions open up. So we see, at least our experience at SC, when our students graduate, most of them are getting jobs as an assistant to somebody on somebody's team. They're not going to be the first assistant, because the first assistant worked his or her way up, just as this graduate will do eventually. But at the same time, then they're out seeking low budget opportunities for other things. So they're not getting a lot of sleep. And honestly, it takes maybe about last time we talked, we did a kind of serious investigation about this. It took about average 5 years for people to get to the point where they didn't have to worry about the rent. And that's a really tough deal when you think about, other people who go to graduate school and go to work, whether they're finance or law or medicine or, So you better love your art, right?
Is there anything else, Dan, that you'd like to share about the business, the industry, yourself?
Well, I'm optimistic about the future for people in our work. We've been through some really challenging times, and as I said, the pandemic really skewed the arcs, and so we're not sure where we're going to land at this point, and it's impacted. One thing that's come out of it is that more and more people have realized that they can work at home. I can work with you on a project because I can just slip this file on my computer and send it to you, and we can mess around on it together. Got latency issues to deal with. Well, somebody's going to solve that. We'll figure that stuff out. So all this stuff is creating new opportunities for people. You can't downplay the importance of technology, of course. That's really crucial. It's all, it used to be, and John Williams is terrific. But he's one of the last guys I know. In fact, he's the only guy I know that still sits down with blank manuscript paper at his piano and starts writing out a score. Everybody else is using all this technology that they can't keep running themselves. So they have to hire people to do it. And some of the people they hire are people that are going to schools and learning about composition, but also excelling in technology so they can go and help you with the latest stuff. All right. And they can make sure your studio keeps running. And then you give them a cue to do because you're running late, and they knock it out and you go, this is great. And pretty soon, I have one of the composers that on the faculty members is a composer at SC, Lawrence Schrag. He the guy that he's been his assistant for, I don't know, maybe 10 years, 12 years. He now does, they just split. Everything is split on the cue sheets. That's just it. Because he said he was getting to the point where he was so good, and it allowed me, Lawrence is not an old man, but he's getting older, and it's like he said, I don't have to work as hard, but I'm still developing the themes and working with my assistant, and there it goes. So I think it's difficult and intimidating to go in and say, okay, I'm going to spend $60,000 to go to school, get a degree in composition, but it's not just what. So okay, there's what you learn from the faculty and your fellow students, but it's also then meeting the Ryan Kuglers of the world across the street and getting to work with them and impressing the other people you're in school with, so that when they go out and get a job, like Duncan Thumb picks up the phone and says, hey, come on over. I need some help. Are you free? And so as I say, I am optimistic about that future. And I think, but what it is, and I mentioned this earlier, is what my friend Bill Ross, a very good composer, orchestrator, arranger, talks about: the toolkit. The bigger your toolkit, the more times you can say yes. And the more times you can say yes, the more times people are going to ask you. And so that's how I have this, this motto: work hard, be nice, and get lucky.
Oh, I like that.
Absolutely.
Can I steal that? I'm going to steal that, put it in a book. No kidding.
Please do. Because, and so people say, well, what about the luck part? And I refer to Samuel Goldwyn, who said, I find that the harder I work, the luckier I get. And it's absolutely true. That luck thing is about being in the right place at the right time. And you sometimes don't have any control over that. But if you are at a lot of places at a lot of different times, you're going to get luckier, because somebody's going to say, oh, this happened to me once in the grocery store. I ran into somebody that said somebody was looking that they were working with was looking for a conductor on a session. So I picked up the phone and I got that gig. Now that happened once in my career, but I don't know that experience didn't lead to somebody else recommending me for something. I don't know. Marco Antonini, I was telling you about earlier, our successful student from Italy, he got a gig because one of the violinists at one of our scoring sessions, her brother-in-law or somebody like that, a cousin or somebody, some relative, was doing a movie and they had to fire the composer because it just didn't work and they had very little money left. And he was telling her about it. He didn't know what to do. And she said, I think you should. The one student that stood out for me at this session was this guy, Marco Antonini. So Marco got that gig. I know, but you never know who's watching you. You never know who's paying attention. And so if you do good work, really, you throw yourself and you're a nice person, you're going to get lucky sooner or later. And so that's really the best advice I can give.
Boy, that is what a wonderful place to leave that.
Yeah.
Gosh darn it. I wish I had a chance to work with you.
And I'll just leave you with this thought, which is that I didn't show you the entire place. We have 3 guest bedrooms, and you'd be a welcome visitor with a bottle of champagne and some cheese and crackers. And
I may just take you up on that. I mean, that's a pretty doggone nice offer. And since we didn't get to work together, at least we can go out and have a drink on the lake together.
Absolutely.
Thank you, sir. Dan, you take care of yourself.
Okay, you too, Michael. Be well and stay in touch. Thanks a lot, pal.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Theme music for Gig with Mike Redmond was composed and produced by Other Animal. Thank you for joining me today for another episode of Gig with Mike Redmond. If you like what you heard, I'd ask that you subscribe and like us. And finally, if you have questions about a job or ideas for an episode, contact me at gigwithmikeredmond@gmail.com. Until next time, I'm Mike Redmond, signing off.